January 2019. After a long period of drought conditions, rain begins to fall across North Queensland.
We really did go from drought to flooding rain. The first couple of days of that was quite good and quite joyful with the rainfalls that we had received, but then like everyone else in the region, it soon turned very concerning.
Out west, drought-affected farms are now disaster zones. Sarah Greenhalgh, how devastating could stock losses be?
Sharon, these poor graziers just can't catch a break. They say this is a disaster and fear it could be bad enough to even ruin some of the smaller producers. The toughest part at the moment is these cattle are stranded and simply cannot be reached. Defence Force aircraft should hopefully be arriving tomorrow with hay on board from places like southeast Queensland and Moree, and over the next few days they will be conducting fodder drops to isolated properties.
After 12 days of continuous heavy rain, low temperatures and constant winds, more than 10,000 kilometres of roads and fencing have been washed away, and over 500,000 livestock have perished in the 15,000 square kilometres of floodwater.
It's with the amount of water that we had come through the property, and we lost 90% of the cattle here, just that one event.
When it was raining, we can't go anywhere. Within walking distance, I could see a few cattle, but there's a few cattle that I could walk to each morning, and every day you could see them getting worse and worse.
About a week after the last days of the monsoon event, I flew around in a helicopter to visit some of the devastated properties, and when you're calling into a place where they've lost 80 to 90% of their head, it's very distraught. They're distraught, and it's hard to see, and that was probably one of my toughest days as mayor.
I mean, you have to imagine it. People who've lost everything, and you're standing there with the clothes on your back covered in mud and just about everything else that's been thrown at you. And you say, well, what do I do now? I received a phone call from the Prime Minister, and he said, I need someone to deal with this flood. I've been up there, I'm absolutely devastated by what I've observed, and it needs someone who can cut through. I was assisted by some very capable and able people, and away we went.
The first teleconference we had with all the mayors and the Prime Minister, and he said, we are here with you. And following that, it was only a matter of days that Shane and the first formation of the team were in Cloncurry, and we did a tour.
Look, for us in the early part of the program, it was very much about getting on the ground, finding out what was going on, just understanding where communities were at, what they needed, and really working out what the government could best do to assist.
They've come, they've talked to the people, they've talked to the graziers, they've talked to the businesses, they've talked to locals, kept coming back, kept coming asking us, what do we want?
Sure, we turned up and said, we're from the Commonwealth, we're here to help. But the next question was, what do you need? What do you think we should do? Let's work with you.
The agency has been a constant in our communities, and people recognise the agency and the people that work within the agency, and I think that's been a real positive.
With the support of Scott Morrison, we went down the path of grants. These grants were tax-free, and they were available on minimal form filling. And that was a hand up, wasn't a handout. Now, I make that point because a lot of people had to be convinced that they were not receiving charity. They didn't want charity. The very first recipients were getting their money within 3 days of the transfer of funds from Commonwealth Treasury to Queensland Treasury.
The $75,000 grant was really important for us to be able to access that and to access it quickly.
It's almost like the middleman or the red tape's been cut, and that's been one of the key aims to bust red tape and get stuff happening on the ground quickly.
And then we moved to the $400,000 dollar for dollar grants, again, not loans, in which people were able to restock, refence, replant, because it wasn't just about cows and sheep and goats.
We've put it towards cattle purchases. The next 12 to 24 months are going to be very hard because we lost a lot of our income, cattle that would have been getting sold in that time. So yeah, we've bought a lot of cattle.
We were fortunate enough as the Western Queensland Power Chain to be able to receive some flood recovery or flood recovery funding that actually was there to You know, work with the local councils.
The agency has been there. They've been very supportive, lobbying for us to receive the necessary assistance that we need to recover.
It's unusual for particularly Commonwealth government agencies to be so active out in the community, driving thousands of kilometres.
For an agency to be at the coalface of regional and remote issues and to see firsthand what is happening on the ground.
They operate from a grassroots understanding, and that really is essential for developing good policy.
They come out here, they listen to us, and now they're going to put the faith in us to distribute the funding.
When they are proprietor of the idea, they really can look in the face and say, yeah, that's a local idea. It's locally implemented and it works. Not everything works, but there's only one way to find out whether something works or not, and that's to get up there.
It's sunrise fit for a postcard. But don't be fooled, what's still happening here in Cloncurry is brutal.
What's the last 4 months been like?
Oh yeah, tough.
Yeah.
On a property devastated in the February floods which killed more than 2,500 cattle, the Prime Minister choked back tears.
This is a bit emotional coming back. Now you got me going. That's quite overwhelming.
His government has poured $3.3 billion into the region, helping battling farmers get back on their feet.
There's still a lot of work to do here. There's still a long road ahead.
And the agency has just done a great job. They got it done. The speed of the recovery, the speed of the action that happened is very important to people's lives.
And I think particularly to Shane Stone, who leads by example, is out there in the community day after day, and the rest of the agency follows his lead.
I have people who stop me in the main street at places like Cloncurry and Julia Creek and all those little villages and towns from Mount Isa through to Townsville. They throw their arms around you. I mean, you're still here. Yes, not going anywhere. Here to serve.
As flood recovery in North Queensland continued, other parts of Australia were facing another brutal challenge.
We really started to see the effects of the drought in the middle of 2018. The season was shutting down. BOM were telling us all sorts of bad news, if you like, and we really started to see a lot of clients starting to come to our service. So things were getting bad, and I guess we saw that continue into 2019 with the continuation of the drought.
Large parts of rural Australia were battling severe drought, with the Bureau of Meteorology confirming 2019 as the country's hottest and driest year on record.
Nothing could have quite prepared me for what I saw in the drought zones.
On 5 December 2019, Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced the existing Flood Recovery Agency would be transformed to become the National Drought and North Queensland Flood Response and Recovery Agency, appointing Shane Stone as National Coordinator General for Drought and Flood.
States and territories have different definitions of drought and what constitutes drought. But the simple matter is that there is a common theme through it all. And when you come onto properties and there's not a blade of grass and there are no stock or what's left is dead, there's no house water, which means that people are really struggling to get by on a daily basis. And you ask yourself the question, what can you do to help?
2019 was the worst on record. My family farm has rainfall records going back 100 years, and it was the worst, the lowest rainfall we've ever received in the region. We were at the point that it was our third year of drought, so significant levels of destocking had to occur that year. Our crop failed. The region as a whole was really hurting.
It was definitely way more severe than I have seen in my lifetime, and when I talk to older rural people around a multitude of regions, they haven't seen anything like that since the 1940s.
So when the announcement was made by the Prime Minister of Shane Stone's appointment, that was welcomed because in a sense it meant that government was listening and government was treating this seriously.
And so we had to bring a different approach than what we had in the flood zone. In some ways, the floods were more clear-cut. The drought is a long, lingering, it's like a cancer spreading across the nation. And so we really had to be quick on our feet.
I think that lesson that we had learned through the flood zone about genuinely getting out there and listening and understanding what was going on, what was needed and how the government could best help, the importance of a coordinated approach across the many parts of government.
And I thought, okay, let's lift the lid on every drought measure that's out there. And let's ask the question, is this worth the paper it's written on? Does this make a difference? Does this feed a cow? Let's be brutally honest and then come back together and say, righto, let's divide it up. This works, this sort of works, this over here, well, I think we can live without that. Partway through, we realised that I couldn't be everywhere. So we struck on the idea that we could have some representatives out in the field. Now, this is something new for the Commonwealth. So they're out there, they're dressed like me, they're badged, and they're there to work with the community, to be my eyes and ears, to be able to come back to me and say, look, we don't think this measure is really as effective as you might, and these are the reasons why. They work right across all government agencies.
They get out in the community and they work alongside the communities and are able to, if you like, flesh out those clients that are in need that maybe sometimes might not necessarily come to rural business support.
There's nothing like a local to really understand the people who live in the region. There's nothing like a local to give a true account of what's happening on the ground.
The agency is a down-to-earth organisation. That's been one of the things that have jumped out at me. It's people that are employed by the agency are people that understand rural communities, farmers, producers and pastoralists. And they are the sort of people which those affected by drought are going to respond to. They're going to open up and they're going to tell them the real stories. And that's extremely important.
Probably the biggest impact that we have is just that personal contact with people. So really being able to engage with them on a personal level. And because we understand the regions that we live in, we know ourselves, a lot of us, come off farms ourselves. We understand what's actually impacting on people.
The people that have been allocated to these communities, to work with these communities, make it more like a friendship, a trusted friendship. Everyone is talking about the agency, from mayors to the farmer, to service providers.
People that have been hurt, people that have been so badly impacted by flood, by drought, they need to know that there is an agency there that is going to lead the way in helping the recovery, in helping get their lives better.
A woman sidled up to me at a community event in New South Wales. She was a mother, she was a wife. And she said, every time my husband went down the shed or the paddock and took his rifle, and he would say he was having to put down some stock, I wasn't sure whether he'd come back. And you can imagine the anxiety and everything that sort of flowed from that, and that was happening on a regular basis. And she said, your people found us a way through, gave us a sense of hope, what we could access to keep going. He could see tomorrow. I can't say that often enough. You've got to bring hope when people have been smashed by a disaster. Because as one drought ends, another one begins. I mean, that's Australia. Anyone who knows this country knows that floods, fire, drought, all sorts of calamities, that's who we are. I believe that we'll be remembered as those people who turned up and stayed the course and delivered. And I can't put it any simpler than that.